People always ask me where love begins. Some say it starts with fate. Some say it begins with a first glance. Others believe it happens when two people are meant to meet at exactly the right time. For me, love began with a cup of coffee that I didn't even like. My name is Serena. I'm 24 years old. And for the past 3 years, I've been working from home as a graphic designer for an international company. Most people think working from home is relaxing. And in many ways, it is. I don't have to wake up before sunrise to beat the traffic. I don't have to spend hours commuting. My office is simply a small desk beside the window in my apartment. But there's another side to it. Working from home can also be lonely. Day after day, my routine barely changed. Wake up, make breakfast, answer emails, attend online meetings, finish projects, sleep, then do everything all over again. Sometimes I didn't even realize the sun had already set because I was too busy staring at my computer screen. That's why I made a promise to myself. At least once every week, I'd leave my apartment and treat myself to something nice. Sometimes it was a movie. Sometimes it was shopping. But most of the time, it was cafe hopping. I loved discovering hidden cafes. Not the ones that became famous because of pretty decorations. I wanted cafes where people genuinely cared about the drinks they served. Places that felt warm. Places that felt peaceful. Places that felt like home. Unfortunately, most of the cafes I visited looked beautiful but disappointed me. The drinks were average. The pastries were dry. The prices were expensive. And after almost every visit, I found myself thinking, I paid for the decorations, not the drinks. So I kept searching. I had no idea that my search would eventually lead me to someone who would completely change my life. One Friday evening, my phone buzzed while I was finishing a design project. It was Samantha. She wasn't just my best friend. She was practically the sister I never had. We met years ago during a volunteer event, and somehow we clicked immediately. After everything she had gone through in her own love story, seeing her genuinely happy always made me smile. Especially because she was with Clyde. Watching the two of them together reminded me that second chances really do exist. A few seconds later, another notification appeared. Our group chat. Cafe tomorrow? I smiled and quickly typed back. Only if you promise it's better than the last place you dragged me to. A second later, Clyde joined in. Hey, that cafe wasn't bad. I couldn't help laughing. The coffee tasted like disappointment. Within seconds, both of them reacted with laughing emojis. Even through a phone screen, I could already imagine Samantha laughing while Clyde pretended to be offended. The next afternoon, we met for lunch. As expected, Samantha and Clyde arrived together. Watching them tease each other over something as simple as choosing where to sit made me smile. They looked so comfortable together. It was hard to believe they had once spent an entire year apart. Samantha caught me smiling. What? I grinned. You two are so disgustingly cute. Clyde laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Samantha gently nudged my shoulder. When are you going to let someone make you smile like that? I dramatically rolled my eyes. Oh, here we go. She laughed. I mean it. You're 24. So? So maybe it's time to stop marrying your laptop. Even Clyde started laughing. I agree. I pointed at both of them. Traitors. The three of us burst into laughter. I honestly loved moments like that. Simple conversations. Good food. The people who mattered most. Sometimes, that was enough to make an ordinary afternoon unforgettable. After lunch, Samantha suddenly snapped her fingers. Oh, Serena, there's actually a cafe I think you'll love. That immediately caught my attention. Really? She nodded enthusiastically. It's still new, so not many people know about it yet. Clyde leaned forward. The pastries are amazing. And the drinks are actually worth the price. I crossed my arms. You've both tricked me before. Samantha laughed. This time we're serious. Clyde smiled. One of my friends works there. That made me curious. Oh? His name's Max. He started working there a few months ago. Samantha nodded in agreement. We've already been there a few times. I honestly think it'll become your favorite cafe. I raised an eyebrow. That's a pretty bold claim. She smiled confidently. Go there on Valentine's Day. I blinked. You want me to spend Valentine's Day alone? She shrugged playfully. Call it a self-date. Clyde nodded. Honestly, February 14th is the perfect day. The atmosphere is really nice. The staff decorate the whole cafe. And trust me. He smiled. The pastries sell out fast. I laughed. You two are starting to sound like unpaid advertisers. They looked at each other before laughing again. I shook my head smiling. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about their recommendation. Out of curiosity, I searched for the cafe online. It had only been open for about 5 months. There weren't many reviews yet, but almost every review said the same thing. The drinks are amazing. The pastries are freshly baked. The staff are incredibly friendly. One review even said, "This place deserves more customers." I smiled. Maybe hidden gems really did exist. The next morning, February 14th, Valentine's Day. While most people were getting ready for romantic dates, I was standing in front of my closet, trying to decide what to wear. I laughed at myself. "It's just coffee, Serena. Why are you acting like this?" Still, for some reason, I wanted to look nice. After trying on a few outfits, I finally settled on a cream-colored blouse, light blue jeans, white sneakers, and a small gold necklace. Simple. Comfortable. Cute enough for a self-date. The cafe was only a short walk from my apartment. The moment I stepped inside, I immediately understood why Samantha loved it. It wasn't overly fancy. It wasn't trying too hard to impress people. Instead, everything felt warm. Soft music played quietly in the background. The smell of freshly baked pastries filled the air. Sunlight poured through the large windows, making the entire cafe feel bright and welcoming. For the first time in months, a cafe immediately felt like somewhere I wanted to stay. Before I could look around any longer, someone greeted me. "Good afternoon. Welcome." I turned toward the counter. And that's when I saw his name badge. Max. For a split second, the rest of the cafe faded into the background. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't doing anything extraordinary. He was simply smiling while welcoming customers. Yet somehow that smile immediately caught my attention. He had neatly styled black hair, kind brown eyes, and the kind of calm expression that instantly made people feel comfortable. He looked clean, approachable, effortlessly handsome. When our eyes met, he smiled again. "First time here?" His voice was warm, gentle, the kind of voice that made me feel relaxed without even realizing it. I quickly nodded. "Yes. Welcome. I hope you enjoy your visit." Why is my heart beating so fast? Calm down, Serena. He's just being polite. He's literally doing his job. I silently scolded myself before stepping closer to the counter. Why was ordering suddenly so difficult? Max waited patiently. No pressure. No impatience. Just a small, encouraging smile. "What would you recommend?" I finally asked. He thought for a moment. "If you like coffee, I'd recommend our house blend. I drink it almost every day." I smiled. "Then I'll trust your recommendation." His smile widened just a little. "Great choice." I didn't have the heart to admit one tiny problem. I actually wasn't a coffee person. A few minutes later, I found a seat near the window and opened my laptop. Before starting my work, I picked up my cup and took my first sip. I forced myself to smile. It wasn't bad. Actually, it was really good coffee. The problem was I simply didn't like coffee, no matter how well it was made. Still, I quietly drank it anyway. After all, it had been his recommendation. I tried focusing on my design project. I really did. But every few minutes, I caught myself glancing toward the counter. Not intentionally. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Every time I looked up, Max was doing something different. Helping customers. Preparing drinks. Serving pastries. Laughing with his coworkers. He never looked annoyed. He never looked impatient. He seemed genuinely happy to be there. And somehow, watching him smile made me smile too. I quickly looked back at my laptop. "Focus, Serena. You're here to work." A few minutes later, I looked again. "Seriously?" I sighed to myself. "Get it together." Hours passed before I finally packed my laptop into my bag. As I stood up to leave, Max happened to look in my direction. He smiled. "Thank you for visiting." I smiled back. "I'll definitely come back." The words slipped out before I even realized what I had said. For a brief moment, I felt embarrassed. Why did I say that out loud? But instead of looking surprised, his smile only became warmer. "We'll be here." Such a simple answer. Yet for some reason, it stayed with me during my entire walk home. I couldn't stop thinking about him. His smile. His voice. His kindness. I laughed softly at myself. "Seriously, Serena? It was only one visit. Why are you acting like this?" I shook my head and smiled. Maybe I was just happy that I had finally found a cafe I genuinely liked. Or maybe there was another reason. At the time, I honestly didn't know. All I knew was that I was already looking forward to going back. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of my closet much earlier than usual. It was only my second visit to the cafe. There was absolutely no reason for me to spend nearly 20 minutes deciding what to wear. And yet, there I was, staring at rows of neatly pressed blouses as if I were preparing for an Important client presentation. Or maybe a date. No, I quickly whispered to myself. It is not a date. I laughed and shook my head. You're just going there to work. That was technically true. I worked remotely as a graphic designer, which meant I could do my job anywhere with decent Wi-Fi. No coworkers.no dress code.no reason to wear heels. Still, my hand reached for my favorite light pink blouse, black tailored trousers, and nude heels. Professional, elegant. The kind of outfit someone would wear to a corporate office. Definitely not a neighborhood cafe. When I finished getting ready, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I smiled to myself. If I'm leaving the apartment anyway, I might as well look nice. Deep inside, I knew exactly who I wanted to look nice for. The little bell above the cafe door chimed as I stepped inside. The familiar aroma of freshly baked pastries immediately welcomed me. And a familiar voice greeted me. Good morning. I looked toward the counter. Max. His smile was just as warm as I remembered. For some reason, seeing him smile made me smile too. Good morning, I replied. He tilted his head slightly. Back already? I nodded. I guess your cafe shop passed my quality test. He chuckled. I'm glad. I was hoping yesterday wasn't just a one-time visit. It wasn't. I glanced around the cafe. I actually liked it here. His smile softened. That makes me happy. I stepped closer to the register. So, what can I get for you today? Before I could answer, he suddenly stopped typing on the register. Oh, he looked genuinely surprised. I just remembered something. What is it? He scratched the back of his neck with an embarrassed smile. I completely forgot to ask yesterday. I blinked. Ask what? He picked up a plastic cup and uncapped a black marker. What name should I write on your cup? My heart skipped a beat. My name? It was such a simple question. One word. One answer. Yet somehow, my mind suddenly went completely blank. Why was I nervous? He was only asking for my name. Customers probably answered this question every single day. Nothing came out. Max waited patiently. His expression never changed. I looked everywhere except at him. Then, without thinking, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I like your haircut. Silence. Max blinked. What? I felt my cheeks instantly grow warm. I said, I like your haircut. For a second, he simply stared at me. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Just softly. The kind of laugh that somehow made me even more embarrassed. Thank you. But, he held up the empty cup. Cafe policy. I still need something to write here. I bit my lower lip to stop myself from laughing. Then I leaned forward just a little. Then today's order name is? I pretended to think very seriously. The girl who likes your haircut. He stared at me for 2 whole seconds. Then burst into another laugh. I don't think that's going to fit on the cup. I couldn't help laughing too. I guess not. He shook his head, still smiling. You know, I've asked hundreds of customers for their names. And no one has ever answered me like that. Really? Really? I'll consider that an achievement. I think you should. He laughed softly. So, what can I get for you today? I smiled. Can you recommend another drink? He nodded immediately. If you enjoyed yesterday's coffee. I almost laughed. I survived yesterday's coffee. He frowned in confusion. Survived? I mean, it was good. Really good. I quickly waved both hands. I just don't actually like coffee. There was a brief silence. Then Max laughed. You don't like coffee? I shook my head. I've tried for years. I wanted to like it. I really did. But no matter how many cafes I visit, I just can't. He crossed his arms. Then why did you order my recommendation yesterday? I smiled sheepishly. Because you recommended it. His ears turned slightly red. You didn't have to do that. I know. But I wanted to. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. Okay. No more coffee. I think I have something you'll actually enjoy. A few minutes later, he placed a strawberry milk tea on the counter. Try this. It's one of my favorites. I took one sip. Immediately, my eyes widened. Oh, this is really good. I knew it. He looked surprisingly proud of himself. I had a feeling you preferred sweet drinks. I laughed. Was I really that obvious? He nodded. You made a very interesting face while drinking the coffee yesterday. I covered my face with both hands. You noticed? I notice more than people think. I groaned dramatically. So I embarrassed myself on my very first visit? Oh no. But, he smiled reassuringly. My heart completely forgot how to beat. Cute? Did he really just say that? Thankfully, another customer walked in before I had to answer. The following morning, I returned to the cafe. The moment I reached the register, Max picked up another cup and another marker. Name? I smiled innocently. I like your perfume. He stared at me. Then laughed. Again? I simply smiled. The next day. Name? Your eyes are really pretty. He sighed dramatically. That's not a name. I know. I'm just making sure you know. He shook his head while laughing. You are impossible. So I've been told. I'm beginning to think you don't actually have a name. Maybe I don't. I refuse to believe that. Every single visit. He asked for my name. Every single visit. I answered with another compliment. Sometimes it was about his haircut. Sometimes his perfume. Sometimes his smile. Sometimes the way he greeted every customer so kindly. I honestly didn't know why I kept doing it. Maybe I simply enjoyed seeing him become slightly embarrassed. Maybe I liked hearing him laugh. Maybe. I liked the way his smile became a little brighter every time I walked through the cafe doors. Or maybe. I was flirting. Even if I refused to admit it. One quiet afternoon, there weren't many customers inside the cafe. I was sitting near the window, finishing a design project, while Max prepared drinks behind the counter. When my order was ready, he looked at the empty cup in his hand before looking at me. Then he smiled to himself. I figured it out. I looked up from my laptop. Figured out what? A solution. I walked over to the counter. What kind of solution? He leaned against the counter with a grin. If you won't tell me your name, I'll just make one up. I folded my arms. Oh? I'm listening. He looked at me from head to toe. Today, I happened to be wearing my favorite bright red blouse. His eyes settled on it before he uncapped the black marker. From now on. He slowly wrote something on the side of my cup. When he turned it toward me, I couldn't help but smile. Misread. I blinked. Misread? He nodded proudly. You've never told me your name. So until you finally do, I'll identify you by whatever color you're wearing. I laughed. That's actually clever. I know. I surprised myself. So if I wear blue tomorrow? He smiled. You'll find out. A few minutes later, another order was finished. Max picked up my drink and glanced around the cafe. Then, in a clear but friendly voice, he called out. Miss Red, your drink is ready. For a brief second. The entire cafe seemed to pause. Several customers instinctively looked around, searching for whoever Miss Red was. A young couple near the window glanced at each other in confusion. An older woman lifted her eyes from the book she was reading. Even one of the students sitting near the outlet looked around curiously. Who's Miss Red? Someone quietly whispered. I froze. Oh no. I covered my face with one hand as I slowly stood up. When I walked toward the counter, I could already see the amused smile on Max's face. So, he said, trying not to laugh. I guess the nickname works. I accepted my drink, shaking my head. I can't believe you actually called me that. You told me to make something up. I didn't think you'd announce it to the whole cafe. He shrugged innocently. How else was I supposed to let Miss Red know her drink was ready? I couldn't help laughing. You're unbelievable. And yet. He smiled. You still came to get your drink. I didn't exactly have a choice. No. You really didn't. We both laughed. As I walked back to my table, I could still feel a few curious customers watching me before returning to their own conversations. For the rest of the afternoon, every time I looked at the words Miss Red written on my cup, I found myself smiling. The next morning, I purposely reached for my royal blue blouse. As I stood in front of the mirror, I laughed at myself. Was I really choosing my clothes because of a nickname? Apparently. Yes. The moment I stepped inside the cafe, Max looked up. His eyes immediately landed on my blouse. A knowing smile appeared on his face. Good morning. He paused dramatically. Miss Blue. I couldn't stop smiling. You remembered. I told you. I'm committed to the color system. Should I be worried? Not unless you start wearing rainbow outfits. I laughed so loudly that a few customers looked our way. The following week, I wore a white blouse. Before I even reached the counter. Welcome back. Miss White. The next day. A soft pink cardigan. Hi, Miss Pink. Another day. A dark violet dress. There you are. Miss Black. Eventually, I stopped wondering what drink Max would recommend. Instead, I started wondering what nickname I'd hear that morning. Without realizing it, the color game had become our own little tradition. It wasn't just Max anymore. One afternoon, another barista handed me my cheesecake. Here you go, Miss Blue. I blinked. You know it too? She smiled. It's hard not to. I'm Anna, by the way. I caught myself before saying my name. Anna laughed. She pointed toward Max, who was busy making another drink. He refuses to call you anything except colors. I looked toward him. He happened to glance up at the exact same moment. When our eyes met, he smiled. Just like he always did. A few days later, I accidentally overheard a conversation behind the counter. One of the baristas nudged Max. Bro, does she actually have a real name? Max laughed while placing a lid on a cup. I'm sure she does. Then why don't you ask? I have. And? He smiled to himself. She keeps complimenting me instead. The entire staff burst into laughter. Another coworker shook his head. So you're really sticking with the color names? Max shrugged. They work. And besides. He looked toward me for a brief second. I kind of like them. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly looked back at my laptop before anyone noticed I had been listening. For some reason, hearing him say that made those silly little nicknames feel even more special. As the weeks passed, our conversations grew longer. One afternoon, he asked, if you weren't working remotely, what job would you have chosen? I smiled. I'd probably still be doing something creative. What about you? He thought for a moment. I always wanted a cafe like this. I looked around the cozy space. You mean working here? He smiled. Something like that. There was something about the way he answered that made me wonder if there was more to the story. But I didn't ask. One Friday evening, Samantha and Clyde invited me out for dinner. The moment I sat down, Samantha narrowed her eyes at me. What? She smiled. You've been smiling a lot lately. I always smile. Not like that. Clyde chuckled. I agree. I rolled my eyes. You two planned this, didn't you? Maybe. Samantha leaned forward. So, how's the cafe? It's nice. Still just nice? I pretended to study the menu. It's a really good cafe. And the drinks are amazing. And the pastries are fresh. And exactly. You two are impossible. Clyde laughed. We're waiting. For what? The part where you mentioned Max. I nearly dropped my glass of water. I never said anything about Max. You didn't have to, Samantha teased. Your face did. I covered my cheeks. They're not even red. Oh, they definitely are. The three of us burst into laughter. A few moments later, Clyde smiled knowingly. You know, I saw Max yesterday. I looked up before I could stop myself. You did? He nodded. We were talking after his shift. What did he say? The question escaped my mouth far too quickly. Samantha immediately smirked. Elle knew it. I groaned. Forget what I asked. Too late. Clyde laughed before continuing. And do you know what he said? I slowly looked up. What? He said. She always looks so professional. Then Clyde smiled. That's not all. My heart started beating a little faster. He asked what time you usually start work. Why? Because? Clyde grinned. He said he already knows what time Miss Red usually walks through the cafe door. He notices if you're 5 minutes late. And on the day you didn't come in last week. He kept glancing at the entrance. Samantha smiled softly. He thought maybe you were sick. For a long moment. I couldn't say anything. I simply stared at the table while trying to hide the smile spreading across my face. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had started looking forward to our mornings. Another month passed. Max still didn't know my real name. Every time he asked for it, I answered with another compliment instead. That Saturday afternoon, the cafe was especially busy. Every table was occupied. Customers lined up near the counter, chatting while waiting for their orders. The sound of coffee machines, quiet conversations, and soft music blended together into the familiar atmosphere I had come to love. After finishing my work for the day, I walked to the counter to order another drink. The moment Max saw me, he smiled. There you are. His eyes briefly looked over my outfit before returning to my face. So, what color are we today? I laughed. I think you've already used almost every color. I know. He chuckled. I'm running out of ideas. He picked up an empty cup and uncapped his marker. So, what should I write this time? I looked at him for a moment. Then a ridiculous idea entered my mind. It was childish. Completely embarrassing. And because of that, I suddenly wanted to do it. I leaned a little closer across the counter. I have an idea. He raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Maybe. He laughed softly. Go ahead. I lowered my voice until only he could hear. Right. I paused, trying not to smile. My future wife. For a moment. Max simply stared at me. What? My future wife. His eyes widened. His ears immediately turned red. You can't be serious. I am. He looked down at the empty cup. Then back at me. Then around the cafe. It was packed. Dozens of customers were waiting for their drinks. You know. He said quietly. I have to call whatever I write on the cup. I know. And everyone will hear it. I know. His face became even redder. He scratched the back of his neck, obviously trying to think of a way out. You really want me to write that? I nodded with the most innocent smile I could manage. Unless cafe policy says no. He let out a defeated sigh. I don't think there's a rule against it. For several more seconds, he didn't move. He simply stared at the cup while gently tapping the marker against it. I could practically see him debating with himself. Finally, without another word, he carefully wrote exactly what I had requested. My future wife. The moment he finished writing, he stared at the words for another second before covering his face with one hand. I already regret this. I couldn't stop smiling. I think you'll survive. Barely. Trying not to laugh, I returned to my usual table by the window while Max began preparing my drink. From where I was sitting, I could see him working as usual. But every now and then, his eyes drifted toward my cup. Each time they did, he sighed and blushed. I quietly bit my lip to stop myself from laughing. A few minutes later, Anna walked over to help him prepare the next orders. She noticed Max staring at one particular cup. You okay? Max immediately turned the cup around before she could read it. Yeah. You look nervous. I'm fine. She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. You don't look fine. I'm just. He paused. Thinking. Anna laughed. Thinking about what? Nothing. She shrugged before returning to the espresso machine, completely unaware of what was written on the cup. Max glanced toward me for the briefest moment. I smiled innocently. He shook his head as if silently asking why I enjoyed making his job difficult. I simply smiled even wider. Several minutes later, my drink was finally finished. Max placed the lid on the cup and picked it up. Then he froze. Again. He stared at the words. Took a deep breath. Exhaled. Then looked around the cafe. Anna noticed him hesitating. Go ahead. Your customer's waiting. Another coworker looked over. Everything okay? Max forced an awkward smile. Yeah. He cleared his throat. Raised the cup slightly. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he called, my future wife. He paused for the briefest second. His entire face had turned bright red. Then he finished. Your order is ready. Silence. The cafe instantly became quiet. Conversation stopped. Customers slowly lifted their heads. Several people looked toward Max. Then immediately began looking around the room. A little boy frowned in confusion. Mom. Who's his future wife? His mother laughed behind her hand. I don't know. An elderly couple exchanged amused smiles. One college student whispered to her friend. Did that barista just confess to someone? Near the counter, even Max's coworkers looked completely stunned. Anna blinked twice. Wait. She looked at the cup, then at Max. Then back at the cup again. Anyway. Another barista burst out laughing. You actually called that? I had to, Max muttered. You wrote it? I didn't choose it. Anna immediately looked around the cafe. Okay. Who ordered that? I could feel dozens of curious eyes scanning the room. Trying, and failing, not to smile, I slowly stood up from my usual seat. As I walked toward the counter, people quietly watched me. A few customers laughed the moment they realized I was the mysterious my future wife. Others smiled as if they had just witnessed the beginning of a romantic comedy. I stopped in front of Max. I believe that's mine. He let out the longest sigh of relief. I can't believe you made me say that. I accepted the drink with a grin. You followed cafe policy. I'm changing the policy. I laughed. So there'll never be another, my future wife? Never. Anna folded her arms while trying not to laugh. So, this was your idea? I nodded proudly, guilty. She pointed at Max. I've worked with him for almost a year. I have never seen him blush like that. Another coworker added. I thought he was going to refuse. So did I, Anna admitted. Max buried his face in one hand. You people are never letting this go, are you? Absolutely not. Everyone behind the counter laughed. As I looked down at my cup, I noticed something written near the bottom in much smaller handwriting. It definitely hadn't been there a few moments ago. An Instagram username. I looked up in confusion. Max had already turned away to prepare another order. He didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Anna caught my eyes instead. Without saying a word, she gave me a quick wink, then quietly mouthed, "Don't tell him," before returning to work as though nothing had happened. I looked back at the cup. A smile slowly spread across my face. I stared at the Instagram username for the entire walk home. Every few steps, I found myself looking down at the photo of my cup just to make sure. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't, there it was. Written neatly near the bottom of the cup. One simple username. I smiled to myself. The moment I arrived home, I continued working on a client project. Or at least, I tried to. Every few minutes, my eyes wandered back to the photo of the cup. My cursor blinked on the screen. The design software remained untouched. I sighed. This is ridiculous. I picked up my phone. Opened Instagram. Then stopped. What if he thinks I'm being weird? I closed the app again. 5 minutes later. I opened it once more. What if Anna gave me the wrong account? I closed it again. 10 minutes later. I laughed at myself. Serena. You're 24 years old. It's just a follow request. Taking a deep breath, I typed the username into the search bar. His profile appeared almost immediately. The profile picture was exactly what I expected. Max was standing behind the cafe counter, wearing his apron and smiling naturally at the camera. His bio was simple. Coffee. Good conversations. Fresh pastries. That was so him. Without giving myself another chance to overthink it, I pressed follow. Then I locked my phone and tossed it onto the couch. There. It's done. I tried going back to work. Less than 30 seconds later. My phone vibrated. I picked it up. Max accepted your follow request. My eyes widened. Already? Almost immediately, another notification appeared. Max sent you a message. My heart skipped. I opened it. Max, so Anna finally convinced you? I couldn't help laughing. I quickly typed back. Me, you knew? The typing indicator appeared almost instantly. Max, she isn't exactly subtle. She kept smiling at me for the rest of the afternoon. I figured she'd done something. I smiled. She's a terrible secret keeper. The worst. A few seconds later, another message arrived. I'm glad you followed me. For some reason. Reading those 5 words made me smile more than I expected. That evening, our conversation continued. What started as a few messages somehow turned into hours of chatting. We talked about everything. Funny customer stories from the cafe. The strangest design requests I'd ever received from clients. When I mentioned that one client wanted an entire presentation redesigned the night before a deadline, Max replied, okay. I officially promise never to become that customer. I laughed out loud. Please don't. Deal. Hours passed without either of us noticing. At exactly 11:47 that night, another message appeared. Max. Can I ask you something? Sure. Would it be okay if I called you? I stared at the screen. A phone call? I suddenly became aware of how messy my hair was. As if he could somehow see me through the phone. I laughed at myself. Then typed. Okay. Almost immediately. My phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. For a few seconds, I simply stared at it. Then I answered. Hello? There was a brief silence before his familiar voice reached my ears. Hi. I smiled without realizing it. Hi. I wasn't sure if you'd actually answer. I almost didn't. He laughed. I figured. His laugh sounded different over the phone. Softer. More relaxed. We talked for nearly 3 hours. There were moments when neither of us spoke. But somehow, the silence never felt awkward. It felt comfortable. Near the end of the call, I looked at the clock. 2:18 a.m. We should probably sleep. We probably should. Neither of us hung up. Instead, we both laughed. Finally, I took a deep breath. There is something I should probably tell you. Oh? My real name. There was a short pause on the other end. I guess it's about time. I smiled. By the way, I'm Serena. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then I heard him chuckle softly. So? The mystery is finally solved. I guess it is. You have no idea how long I've been wondering. Really? Every single day. I kept thinking. What kind of name does Miss Red actually have? I laughed. And honestly, his voice became gentler. I don't know why. But I always had a feeling you'd have a beautiful name. It fits you. I smiled so widely that my cheeks started hurting. Thank you. You're welcome. He paused. Serena. Hearing him say my name for the first time felt strangely different. For months, I had been misread, blue, white. Now, for the first time, I was simply Serena. And somehow, hearing my name in his voice made it sound even more special. From that night on, chatting became part of our everyday routine. We still saw each other at the cafe almost every morning. But after work, our conversations continued through messages. Sometimes they lasted until midnight. Sometimes one of us would accidentally fall asleep while waiting for the other to reply. Phone calls became just as common. Somehow, conversation came naturally. Even after spending hours together at the cafe, we still found more things to talk about. Without realizing it, the friendship that had begun with colorful nicknames was quietly becoming something much deeper. Neither of us had confessed our feelings. Neither of us had said the words out loud. But somewhere between Miss Red and Serena, our hearts had already started finding their way toward each other. Looking back now, It's funny how 6 months can change everything. And every morning, before I could even say a word, Max would already be smiling. Good morning, Serena. The first few times he called me by my real name, I couldn't help smiling. Our little color game never completely disappeared. Whenever I wore one of my old blouses, Max would grin and say, "So, Miss Blue is making a comeback today?" Or, "I haven't seen Miss Pink in a while." I always laughed. I thought we retired those nicknames. We did. He shrugged playfully. But they're still part of our story. Some mornings, Anna would overhear us and shake her head. "You two are impossible." Maybe we were. But neither of us seemed to mind. The days settled into a comfortable rhythm. I'd spend my mornings working from the cafe. Max would stop by my table whenever business became slow. Sometimes he'd bring over a new drink for me to taste before it was added to the menu. "What do you think?" "I think you already know I'm going to like it. I just need professional confirmation." "I'm a graphic designer." "Exactly. So you're creative." I laughed every single time. When he finished his shift, we'd often walk together for a few blocks before going our separate ways. Sometimes we'd have dinner. Sometimes we'd browse bookstores. Sometimes we'd simply sit in a nearby park, talking until the sky turned orange. Nothing about it ever felt complicated. Being with Max was easy, comfortable, peaceful. It felt like I'd known him for much longer than 6 months. One quiet afternoon, I arrived at the cafe a little earlier than usual. The doors were already open, but there weren't many customers yet. As I walked inside, I noticed a man wearing a business suit speaking with one of the suppliers near the counter. When he saw Max, he smiled politely. "Morning, sir." "Sir?" I slowed my steps. The supplier handed Max several documents. "I've already checked the inventory. We'll also need your approval for next month's orders." Max nodded naturally as he signed the papers. "No problem. I'll review everything this afternoon." The supplier thanked him before leaving. I stared at Max in confusion. He noticed my expression almost immediately. "What?" I walked closer. "Why did he call you, sir?" Max looked surprisingly nervous. "Oh. That." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" He let out a quiet laugh. "I'm not just a barista." I folded my arms. "I noticed." He smiled sheepishly. "I actually own the cafe." For several seconds, I simply blinked. "You, what?" He laughed. "My parents helped me open this place. I manage everything. The menu. The suppliers. The staff. The finances." I looked around the cafe. "So, you've been the owner this entire time?" He nodded. "Yes. And you still work the counter every single day?" "I do." "Why?" He looked at me for a long moment before smiling. "At first, because I enjoy making coffee. Then?" His smile grew softer. "Then someone wearing different colored blouses kept walking through that door every morning." My heart skipped a beat. "So, I stayed." I couldn't stop smiling. "You mean, you could have been in the office this whole time?" "I could have. But then," he shrugged, "I would have missed seeing you." I looked away, trying to hide the warmth spreading across my cheeks. "You make it very difficult not to like you." He laughed. "I was hoping that was already happening." "It was," I admitted quietly. "It definitely was." For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply smiled at each other. Somehow, that silent exchange said more than words ever could. Life couldn't stay that peaceful forever. One evening, just as I was finishing work, my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. Her voice trembled. "Serena, can you come home?" My heart sank. "What happened?" "It's your grandmother. She was taken to the hospital. We need you here." Without hesitation, I packed a small suitcase that night. The next morning, I went to the cafe before leaving for the province. Max immediately noticed something was different. "You look worried." I forced a small smile. "I have to go home." His expression changed. "For how long?" "I'm not sure. My grandmother's in the hospital. I need to help my family." Without saying another word, he stepped around the counter and gently pulled me into a hug. It lasted only a few seconds. But somehow, it made me feel stronger. "I'll be okay," I whispered. "I know." He looked into my eyes. "But I'm still going to worry." I smiled sadly. "I know." Before leaving, I promised. "I'll message you when I arrive." "You'd better." "I will." The trip back to the province felt much longer than usual. The following weeks became a blur of hospital visits, family responsibilities, paperwork, and taking care of my grandmother while trying to continue working remotely. Some days were exhausting. Some nights, I fell asleep before I could even finish dinner. But no matter how busy life became, there was one thing that never changed. Max. Every morning, I woke up to a message. Good morning, Serena. Have you eaten yet? Don't forget to take care of yourself too. Throughout the day, he'd check in whenever he had a free moment. Sometimes he'd send a photo of a new pastry. Sometimes a picture of the cafe. Sometimes just a selfie making a funny face in the background. Whenever we had time, we'd call each other. Even if it was only for 10 minutes. Hearing his voice somehow made the distance feel smaller. The couple also checked on me and Grandma as well. One evening, Samantha called. How are you holding up? I'm okay. You don't sound okay. I laughed softly. I'm just tired. We miss you. I miss you too. Then Clyde suddenly appeared beside her on the screen. And before you ask. He grinned. Yes. Max talks about you almost every day. I covered my face with one hand. He does not. He absolutely does. Samantha nodded. Whenever someone opens the cafe door. He still looks up. My heart tightened. Clyde smiled. He says it's become a habit. A few nights later, Max called just before closing time. I have something important to tell you. What is it? When all of this is over. When you're finally coming back. He smiled through the screen. Don't take a taxi. I tilted my head. Why? Because I'm picking you up. I smiled. You don't have to do that. I know. I want to. For a moment. Neither of us spoke. Then he added quietly. So. Come back safely, okay? I nodded, smiling through the sudden tears in my eyes. I promise. And for the first time since leaving the city. Going home no longer felt so far away. Because there was someone. Who had quietly become one of. The most important people in my life. Thankfully, my grandmother had grown much stronger. The doctors were pleased with her progress. And after weeks of treatment and careful monitoring, they finally allowed her to continue recovering at home. My parents insisted that I return to Manila before I fell too far behind with work. We'll take good care of your grandma, my mother promised with a gentle smile. You've already done more than enough. It's time for you to go back. Leaving wasn't easy. I hugged my grandmother before leaving the house. She gently squeezed my hand and smiled. Don't worry about me anymore, she whispered. Go back to your life and don't keep that nice young man waiting. I couldn't help laughing. Even from hundreds of kilometers away, somehow everyone in my family had figured out that Max had become someone very special to me. So, here I was, flying back with a heart that felt much lighter than it had 2 months ago. Even though I had been away, Max had somehow made every day feel a little less lonely. Every afternoon, he'd ask if I had eaten lunch. Every evening, we'd talk on the phone until one of us accidentally fell asleep. Sometimes we'd simply stay on the line, enjoying the quiet. I never imagined that someone could become such an important part of my life without even standing beside me. I smiled as I looked at our latest conversation. Max, let me know when you're home safe. I typed back. I will. I didn't tell him my flight number. Or my arrival time. He had work. The cafe would be busy. The last thing I wanted was for him to leave because of me. Besides, seeing him would be enough. At least. That's what I thought. About an hour later, the plane landed. As I walked through the airport carrying my suitcase, I couldn't help smiling. It felt good to be back. I followed the crowd toward the arrival gate before stopping. Just outside the terminal. I reached for my phone. Maybe I'd book a ride. Or maybe. Misread. My entire body froze. That voice. Slowly. I turned around. Standing only a few steps away was Max. He wore a simple white polo, dark jeans, and the same warm smile that had brightened so many of my mornings. In one hand, he held a small bouquet of red roses. For a second, I couldn't move. What are you doing here? He rubbed the back of his neck, looking a little shy. I told you. I'd pick you up. My eyes widened. But I never told you my flight. You didn't. He smiled. So I asked Samantha. I laughed through the tears already gathering in my eyes. She betrayed me. Very easily. I can't believe her. I thanked her. I shook my head. I'll deal with her later. Neither of us moved. We simply stood there smiling at each other. Then, without thinking, I let go of my suitcase. And ran. The bouquet was nearly crushed between us as I wrapped my arms around him. He hugged me just as tightly. For 2 months. We had only seen each other through phone screens. Now. He was finally here. Real. Warm. Close enough that I could hear his heartbeat. I missed you, I whispered. His arms tightened around me. I missed you too. More than you know. Neither of us seemed willing to let go. Eventually, I laughed softly. If we keep standing here, people are going to think we've been separated for years. He smiled. It felt like years. I couldn't argue with that. The drive back to the city felt surprisingly easy. We talked the entire way. About my parents and grandma. About the cafe. About Anna, who apparently still teased him almost every day. About Clyde. Accidentally burning cookies when he tried helping at the cafe one weekend. Clyde baked? I asked, laughing. Baked is a generous word. So it was that bad? The smoke alarm answered that question. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. It felt wonderful. Like no time had passed at all. Instead of taking me straight home, Max glanced at me as we stopped at a traffic light. Can I steal another hour? I smiled. Where are we going? You'll see. 20 minutes later. He pulled into a familiar parking space. The cafe. It was already closed. The lights inside were dim. Only the warm glow from the hanging lamps remained. He unlocked the front door and held it open for me. Ladies first. The moment I stepped inside, memories came rushing back. The table by the window where I had worked almost every day. The counter where our conversations had begun. The espresso machine that had witnessed countless smiles. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet somehow, it felt different. Maybe because this time, we weren't barista and customer anymore. We were simply Max and Serena. He walked behind the counter without saying a word. A few moments later, he returned carrying 2 drinks. 1 coffee. 1 strawberry milk tea. I laughed. You still remember? I always will. He handed me the milk tea before taking the seat across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Like we were both gathering the courage to say something important. Finally, Max looked at me. These past 2 months. They made me realize something. I quietly waited. I kept counting the days. I checked my phone every few minutes. I looked forward to every message. Every phone call. Every good morning. He smiled faintly. I don't want to spend another day pretending you're just my favorite customer. My heart began racing. He reached across the table. Slowly. Carefully. He took my hand. I like you, Serena. I've liked you for a long time. I think. He laughed softly. I think I started falling for you long before. The tears I'd been holding back finally escaped. I laughed as I wiped them away. You know. I've been hoping you'd say that. His eyes searched mine. Really? I nodded. Because I like you too. I've liked you since the day you smiled at me across this counter. I just didn't know how to tell you. His shoulders relaxed as if a weight had finally been lifted. So. He smiled nervously. Can I officially take you on a real date? I pretended to think. He laughed. You're making me nervous. Good. I've been nervous around you since Valentine's Day. He covered his face with one hand. I deserved that. I reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. Then I smiled. Yes. I'd love to. The smile that appeared on his face was brighter than any I had ever seen. Not the polite smile he gave customers. Not the amused smile from our silly nickname game. This one was different. It was the smile of someone whose heart had just been answered. When we finally stood to leave, he walked beside me toward the door. Just before we stepped outside, he stopped. He looked at me with the same warmth that had made me return to this cafe day after day. Ready to go, Serena? My heart skipped a beat. I smiled. No, I didn't misread at all. Because hearing my name from the man I loved sounded even more beautiful. The beautiful thing about falling in love is that it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in ordinary moments. Morning greetings. Shared meals. Late-night conversations. Inside jokes that no one else understands. And before you realize it, those ordinary moments become your favorite memories. After Max and I officially became a couple, surprisingly, not much changed. At least, not at first. I still worked remotely. I still brought my laptop to the cafe almost every morning. The only difference was, instead of sitting alone by the window, Max would occasionally sneak over during quiet hours just to ask, "Need a refill?" Even if my drink was still half full. It was his excuse to spend another minute with me. And honestly, I never complained. During weekends, I'd help Anna decorate for seasonal events. Sometimes I'd redesign the menu boards or create promotional posters for the cafe's social media pages. It looks so much better, Anna would say every time I finished a new design. Max would smile proudly. I told you she's talented. I always laughed. You say that like you're not biased. I am biased. Very. One afternoon, while business was slow, Max placed a stainless steel pitcher in front of me. Today's lesson. I looked at it curiously. What's this? Latte art. I raised an eyebrow. You trust me with steamed milk? I trust you. Those 3 words still made my heart flutter. He stood behind me, gently guiding my hands as I tilted the cup. Slowly. Relax your wrist. I tried. The milk landed exactly where it wasn't supposed to. Instead of a heart, it looked more like a potato. I stared at it. That's abstract art. Max laughed so hard he had to lean against the counter. I'm trying my best. I know. And I love your potato. I nudged his arm. Don't call it a potato. What should I call it? I thought for a moment. A heart with personality. That's one way to describe it. Months turned into years. We celebrated birthdays together. Spent Christmas with both our families. Went on road trips whenever our schedules allowed. Samantha and Clyde were almost always part of the adventure. You two are impossible. Samantha would laugh whenever Max and I argued over directions. I'm right, Max insisted. No, I replied. The GPS is right. Clyde simply shook his head. I'm staying out of this. None of us ever stopped laughing. As time passed, the cafe became even more successful. More customers discovered it. The tables were now filled almost every day. One afternoon, I looked around the busy cafe before turning to Max. You've built something incredible. He smiled. We built it. I frowned. I only helped with the designs. You helped make this place feel like home. Before I could answer, Anna walked past carrying a tray. He's right. She grinned. Half our customers compliment the menu boards before they even order. I laughed. I guess my job finally paid off. It definitely did. One evening, after closing, Max invited me to help organize one of the storage rooms. I need to show you something. Curious, I followed him downstairs. Boxes were neatly stacked against one wall. Coffee beans. Seasonal decorations. Extra supplies. Then he stopped in front of a large storage cabinet. He unlocked it. When I saw it, I froze. Coffee cups. Dozens of them. No. Every single one had handwriting on the side. Misread. Blue. White. I looked up at him in disbelief. You kept these? He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking embarrassed. I couldn't throw them away. I carefully picked up the very first one. The faded marker still read. Misread. You kept every single one? He nodded. Every cup you ever ordered. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But, why? He smiled softly. Because every color reminds me of a different day. He picked up another cup. This was the day you spilled your drink because you laughed too hard. Another. This one was when you brought cookies for the staff. Then another. This was after your grandmother got better. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. You remember all of that? I remember everything. He looked at me with the same gentle expression that had welcomed me into the cafe years ago. I fell in love with you one ordinary day at a time. Without thinking, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. He hugged me tightly. I love you, I whispered. I love you too. A few months later, Max told me the cafe would be closing early for maintenance. I didn't question it. After all, owning a cafe meant unexpected repairs happened from time to time. That evening, I unlocked the front door using the spare key Max had given me months before. The lights were off. Max? No answer. I stepped farther inside. Then, the lights slowly turned on. Fairy lights stretched across the ceiling. Candles flickered on every table. Fresh flowers surrounded the room. Photographs covered one wall. I slowly walked closer. Pictures of us making latte art. Our road trips. Christmas together. Double dates with Samantha and Clyde. And then, the color nicknames. Pictures of me wearing red, alongside photos of various other colorful outfits. In the center, framed beneath soft lights, was a preserved coffee cup. The one that still read, "My future wife." I covered my mouth as tears filled my eyes. Behind me, I heard familiar voices. I turned around. Anna. The cafe staff. Samantha. Clyde. Everyone smiled. Then, Max walked toward me. He held the preserved plastic cup in one hand. A small velvet ring box in the other. He stopped in front of me and smiled. You know, you gave yourself a very dangerous order name that day. I laughed through my tears. I know. You made me announce it in front of an entire cafe. I know. He chuckled softly before taking a slow breath. It turns out, it wasn't such a bad prediction. Then, he lowered himself onto one knee. The room became completely silent. He opened the ring box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. His eyes never left mine. Serena. The girl who walked into this cafe. The woman who turned my ordinary mornings into the best part of my life. The person I want beside me for every sunrise, every challenge, and every cup we'll ever share. He smiled, his voice growing softer. Will you really become my future wife? By then, I was crying too hard to answer immediately. I laughed through my tears before nodding again and again. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The cafe erupted into applause. Anna wiped tears from her cheeks. Samantha hugged Clyde's arm as she cried openly. Clyde laughed before patting Max on the shoulder. I told you she'd say yes. Max slipped the ring onto my finger before standing and pulling me into the tightest hug. As everyone around us celebrated, I looked at the preserved coffee cup resting on the table. Years ago, it had started as a joke. Now, it had become the most beautiful promise either of us had ever made. For several minutes after Max proposed, neither of us could stop smiling. I looked down at the ring on my finger, then at the preserved cup resting beside us. Max gently intertwined his fingers with mine. So, my future wife. I laughed through my tears. You finally get to say it without embarrassing yourself in front of an entire cafe. He chuckled. I think I'll always be embarrassed when I remember that day. Anna immediately raised her hand. Oh, don't worry. We'll never let you forget it. The entire cafe burst into laughter. Even after all these years, some things never changed. Over the following weeks, wedding planning slowly began. There were venues to visit, guest lists to prepare, dates to choose, flowers, invitations, and menus. It was exciting. But before any of those things mattered, there was something both of us wanted to do first. We wanted to ask for our parents' blessing. Not because we had to, but because we wanted our marriage to begin with the love and support of the people who had raised us. The following Saturday, Max and I traveled to my parents' home. Although I had already told them about the proposal over the phone, Max insisted on asking them properly. The entire drive, he seemed unusually quiet. I smiled. Nervous? A little. You've known my parents for years. I know, but this feels different. I reached over and squeezed his hand. They already love you. I still want to do this the right way. That afternoon, we all gathered in the living room. My parents sat together on the sofa. My grandmother, now much healthier than she had been 2 years earlier, smiled warmly from her favorite chair. Seeing her healthy again filled my heart with gratitude. After a moment of silence, Max stood. He faced my parents respectfully. Sir, ma'am, I love Serena with all my heart. His voice was calm, but I could tell he meant every word. She has made my life happier than I ever imagined. I promised to stand beside her through every joy and every challenge. I'll take care of her. I'll respect her. And I'll keep choosing her every single day. He took a slow breath. With your blessing, I would like to marry your daughter. The room became quiet. Then, my father smiled. He stood and walked toward Max. Without saying anything at first, he simply pulled him into a warm hug and said, You already became part of this family a long time ago. My mother wiped away tears before hugging both of us and said, We couldn't have asked for a better man for our daughter. Then my grandmother reached for Max's hand and said, I prayed that Serena would find someone who would love her completely. She smiled. My prayers were answered. I couldn't stop crying. Happy tears. The kind that made your heart feel completely full. Then it was my turn. The moment we arrived, his mother pulled me into a hug and said to me, I've been waiting for this visit. I laughed. You already know why we're here? She smiled knowingly. A mother always knows. After lunch, Max looked toward his parents. Dad, Mom, we came to ask for your blessing. His father smiled before looking at me. You've made our son happier than we've ever seen him. His mother nodded. The way he talks about you, it reminds us of how we were when we first fell in love. She reached for my hand. Welcome to our family, Serena. Those simple words nearly brought me to tears again. Both our families met and were already talking excitedly about the wedding. It felt less like two families coming together, and more like one big family growing even bigger. Several months later, our wedding day finally arrived. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden surrounded by flowers. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the trees. Everything felt peaceful, almost unreal. As I stood at the end of the aisle with my father, I looked ahead. Max was already waiting. The moment our eyes met, he smiled. The same smile that had made me want to return every day afterward. The same smile that still felt like home. You look beautiful, my father whispered before pulling me into a brief hug. Then, he walked me forward and placed my hand into Max's. Neither of us could stop smiling. Samantha stood beside me as my maid of honor. I knew we'd end up here someday. I laughed softly. You've been saying that since the cafe. I was right. You were. Across from us, Clyde stood proudly as Max's best man. When the officiant asked for the rings, Clyde leaned toward Max with a grin. Don't mess this up. Max laughed. I'll try. Even in such an emotional moment, they still managed to make everyone laugh. When it was time to exchange our vows, I looked directly into Max's eyes. Years ago, I walked into your cafe looking for a place to work. I never imagined I'd find my best friend, my greatest supporter, my home. You first knew me as misread. But today, I'm proud to become your wife. Max smiled through tears before speaking. You taught me that love isn't built through grand gestures. It's built through ordinary mornings, shared conversations, inside jokes, and choosing each other every single day. I promise that no matter how many years pass, I'll keep choosing you. Forever. There wasn't a dry eye among our family and friends. During the reception, Anna walked over carrying 2 drinks. She placed them in front of us before grinning. So, should I still call you Miss Red? Everyone nearby laughed. I looked at Max before smiling. I think you can finally call me Mrs. Smith. Anna laughed. I like that even better. A few days after the wedding, I wrapped my hands around my warm mug, taking in the familiar sight of the empty cafe. Max reached across the table and gently took my hand. For a while, we simply sat there together. No words. No customers. Just the quiet comfort of being exactly where we were meant to be. I couldn't help but smile. Because the barista who once knew me only through the colors I wore, eventually learned my name, then became my best friend, the love of my life, my husband. And every now and then, whenever the cafe was quiet and no customers were around, he would still hand me my favorite strawberry milk tea with that familiar smile and whisper, "Your order is ready, my wife." And somehow, that became my favorite name of all. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more heartwarming stories. See you in the next one.